Hi everyone, my name is Fernando Martinez, and today I interviewed my best friend Francisco Rojas. And the reason as to why I interviewed him mainly had to do with him being a best friend of mine that I've known since the 8th grade, so I've been knowing him now for about almost 8 years. And he also comes from a Hispanic background like me, but he was an only child. But also because I just personally knew him and I wanted to hear more about what his ideals were on the Latin community and how they treat the LGBT community and just gender identity, gender role, gender expression. All these topics, I wanted to hear what he had to say. And actually, there's a couple that surprised me. One that very surprised me a lot was how he spoke of how a man and woman should be in a Latin household. You've obviously probably heard it time and time again, how the man is the provider, the woman is seen as the caretaker. But I was surprised at how much he genuinely put these ideals within his parents. He thought a happy Mexican family where the father goes out, he's working in his big truck, he's got his tejana on, he's got his botas on, he's got his button-down shirt, he's probably working in construction, hard labor, but he's out there working all day being a hard worker while the mom's at home, unemployed, just at home, taking care of the kids, make sure she's cooking. And he really thought this dynamic is what makes a happy family. And that's how it should be. He told me that's how he believed when I was young. He says it's changed a lot since then, not even close to that anymore. He believes that, at least in gender roles, that we should be able to just be who we want to be. Like if you want to be the person at home, he said, that's fine. But be that because you want to be, not because society's telling you to be, not because the Latino community is telling you should be good at cooking. He told me no longer sees the man as the provider. He could also be the caretaker. But it was interesting to me that every time we spoke about the roles of the family, how a man should be, how a woman should be, we explained that we're kind of read like in Latino culture, we disagree how beauty or more so just personal care, you can even say hygiene, is seen as feminine in our culture because it's like that. We don't do it. Talking about moisturizers, face washes, maybe teeth whitening, or even simply doing something to your eyebrows was so feminine in our culture that men wouldn't do it. And we wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do it. He wouldn't do it. But as we grew older, we started to disassociate that idea of these things being exclusively to women. And if you do it, you're either gay, which nothing wrong with it, either you're gay. And it just, that's the thing in our community. He was very prevalent, explained to me, if you do something that is feminine, you are not considered gay when that doesn't identify your sexuality. And that was a huge touching point on his, because he explained how his sexuality, he's straight and he never really questioned, and I always knew he was secure about his sexuality, but his parents did. And it was interesting porque también a mí siempre decían, ¿dónde está la novia? ¿Dónde está la novia? Y la novia, y la novia. Everyone's always asking, where's the girlfriend? And in his case, the pressure was so heavy that he started thinking he was gay, but not because he liked men, but because, wow, why I can't bring a girl around. But he was just a shy kid. More in my case, it was more so I did bring them and then they would stop asking. And he only told me he wanted to bring him, so they would stop asking. In our Latin community, it's so heavy to bring home the girl. But like in my case, what if I bring home the guy? Then what? It's not an accepted thing. It's very bring the girl, be the guy, be together. I don't know. Essentially, there's so much pressure in the Latin community to bring home the girl that in his case, I heard him because he was questioning his sex rotation because he was shy, but not because he actually liked men. I was questioning me in terms of men. I could never bring a guy home now because I'm just so fearful of that. I never put aside. I just stayed with women. By the way, I do identify as bisexual, so I can clarify some things as of now. But these traditionalist ideals just have to go in our community. Hold on to them so strong. I do not know why. It's getting better. We're getting more progressive with it. They grew up with it. But it's still so prevalent in the family that even in my own family, my dad's out there being hardworking, working endlessly hard, but I feel like sometimes even unnecessarily hard. And my mom also worked a lot, so maybe that also helped my mindset that the man and the woman could be the breadwinners, and as opposed to my friend's case where he really believed the man had to be the breadwinner, the woman had to be the caretaker. But my mom was the more caretaking person, and because of that, I grew more fond of her. My father, I love him and I'm close to him, but the relationship I have with my mother is way different than my father. And with my own children in the future, if I do have some, I definitely want to have that connection with them like that, like my mom does with me, and call it feminine as you will. I just want to I don't want to be endlessly working all day just to provide for my family. I want to live with my family. I want to experience memories with my family. I want to grow with them. I don't just want to be there as a provider, just bring money to the table. I want to be so much more than that to my kids. And Francisco also agreed. He also wants to be much more to his kids. And he brought up a good point. Like, instead of seeing as the girl who could cook, because that's another thing we explain in our society, they really want us to get with a girl that cooks. The fact that a girl's worth was being defined by how well she cooks, I think is just disgusting. And so did my friend. We both spoke about this, but he mentioned more. It wasn't so much about cooking, having a girl that cooks, but how you could just sharing those moments. Maybe you're cooking with your girl's cooking with you, or your guy's cooking with you. But it goes back to the same idea. Francisco always mentioned the dynamic of a man and a woman when asking these questions before we got to the LGBT questions. Never at any point did he mention a man with a man, a woman with a woman, or just something different than the norm. And I asked him, why did he not mention it? And he explains to me he grew up with a lot of other issues in terms of sometimes having to go to court. His parents were going through a divorce. He was very shy. He felt very alone in school. There's a lot of other factors going on that the LGBT community was never really prevalent, and especially since he didn't hang around with friends like that at the time, and probably weren't many as out at that point in time. It just wasn't something he came across. But he told me he was familiar with, the word gay, but he never shared the same ideals as his parents. His parents did think of it as being wrong, and mine still don't fully accept it per se, or might think. Honestly, I personally don't even know exactly where my family stands, my parents, because I have not had this conversation with them. But this is where I was very surprised, because Francisco explains to me that he wasn't ever even close to being homophobic or being against LGBT community in terms of just the whole idea of a man liking a man, or a woman liking a woman, or just any of this whole spectrum. He was never against any of it. He never was mad or hating on any of it. He just was always uncomfortable of being around these people and saying the wrong things and getting them angry, because he just said he didn't want to deal with it. He viewed it more as a political topic, as opposed to where it boils down to me. It was this expression and being comfortable with oneself and not feeling bad about their differences. When it comes to the message of just embracing your differences and feeling proud of it and not ashamed, and like Francisco mentioned, he felt like just because you are gay does not mean you need other people that are gay to be around you. I don't think that's necessary, and I completely disagree. I feel like when you do feel different, or you're not the norm, quote unquote, you want people you can relate with, because it makes you accept yourself better for who you are. I think it just gets you to better understand yourself, and you don't feel as guilty or shameful. I'm not sure where these feelings stem from, but I did feel ashamed for being the way I was at first. Not as much anymore, but there's still a tad bit. And when I see a celebrity, or just someone, I guess, mainstream that identifies similar to me, it makes me feel better about myself, because I know that other people like me out there, and just that simple feeling makes me feel more secure and unashamed. As of right now, for example, like, I'm really into soccer, but there's not a single openly LGBT soccer player in the Premier League, which is in England, which is one of the biggest leagues in the world. Well, one of the biggest soccer leagues in the world. And that's where I just appreciate, the LGBTQ community, because we can see people like that and feel represented and not feel abnormal and not feel ashamed. And that's why I appreciate it, and that's what I was trying to teach my friend Francisco, but he still saw it as these people are just doing it for attention. I'm like, I don't that's simply just to gain attention. It's a publicity stunt. I told him, I think you're missing the point. And we differed on this, and maybe I'm not on social media enough to know if that's really the case, but I do know when I see an artist or someone who can identify as I am, I'm happy. It makes me smile because I know I'm not alone, and there's other people like me out there, even at the top. And it's just nice to know when there's someone like you out there like that. It doesn't make you feel as an outcast. And maybe like people do understand. Maybe there's people out there who do understand you and people who understand me. If I had someone, I'm yet to meet another bi male, but I know if I did I'd be really happy, and I wouldn't hang around with him just because he was bi and he was a male, but there'd definitely be some like start of a connection. I don't need them to be that way, but knowing there's someone else out there like me really makes me feel more welcomed. But yeah, he was never against it, but he told me he's against the movement nowadays, and that hurt to hear. And at that moment I actually wanted to bash him and speak out, but I'm like, wait, let me hear him, because he's told me multiple times he's not great with his words. But what he was getting at is that he doesn't like the culture, how it's almost gotten, he called it almost toxic, that it's just cancel culture everywhere, that you could say a little thing, or for things you did back then, they just want to shut you down, the community wants to shut you down, he said. And I interpreted it as when he said he wants the movement to be gone because he just doesn't want different people to embrace their differences. But he was more so, he felt like the message got lost. He said, he's like, I don't pursue that message at all. Now I just see people bullying other people and canceling them and not letting them speak out, or even they can express themselves at all anymore. And I found that interesting. That for him, it's gone to the point where he wants to just cancel the movement. He doesn't want to stop anyone from expressing themselves, but he doesn't want a movement that's out. He views it as a movement that's canceling everybody. And he says he doesn't like going on the media and just seeing all this cancel this, cancel that, cancel culture. He identified as a straight male. And he also called himself a cis male, and he actually didn't know what that meant. Previous to the interview, I was just giving him a quick rundown of gender expression, gender identity, gender role, sexual orientation, and their definitions. And some might say, oh, why'd you tell him that prior to the interview? But I actually think it made it better, and it was actually interesting because I haven't saw in that moment when I was teaching him these words, because they were new to me and even new to him. He was listening to everything I say and taking it in and interpreting it and genuinely just taking in the knowledge and learning what I'm teaching him. At no point did he give me any backlash or like, oh, that's stupid. Like, he was open to every sentence I said about this topic when I was just teaching him, so he could better understand the questions I would ask. And I thought that was really fascinating and interesting. But overall, having this interview with him was also just really eye-opening, because I got to hear his perspective on things and learn things that I don't think I would have learned this soon had I not had this conversation with him. I think that's what this whole ordeal is about, is just having these, I guess, quote-unquote tough conversations, but just normalizing these conversations with people within our community, within our own friends, with a Chicano, Chicanx background, but hopefully just in general with people, to have these tough conversations. Because I think this is the first step to really understanding and kind of just getting things done and normalizing it. It's just by talking, at least that's a great start. I got to hear what he had to say. He heard what I had to say. We both listened. There was no anger at all throughout the whole conversation. There were moments where I was caught off guard, but like I said, I paused and I listened. It wasn't an argument, but a conversation. And I think that's, I guess right now, one of the most powerful tools is just sitting down and trying to understand each other. It honestly inspires me to have more of these conversations with more people and not feeling as timid, because I will say one mental battle I have to this day, it's part of the reason I came out to California, was to just be for myself to be comfortable to talk to other people, specifically males, about my sexual orientation and just my interests. Like I don't want to feel uncomfortable telling a guy that I like a guy, or ashamed for saying that, or feel like I'm burdening him. I just want to feel comfortable with myself and being comfortable with having those conversations with people I normally would not feel comfortable, at least back home. And it really makes me think how I can try to get the conversation started with my own parents, because I do want to have this conversation. It's a tough conversation. And it also helps me see the Chicano community, how a lot of it is based on traditionalist ideals. And I during the conversation, even before, I thought, wow, if I don't agree with these ideals, but once we start getting rid of all of them, are we still Latinos and still hold that culture? But now after talking more and even just having this conversation, like I came to the conclusion, not even close. If anything, you're still as Latino as ever, and you're gonna hold on to that culture. You're still gonna have pride in who you are. But the culture also has to evolve. We can't still teach hate or just teach people being uncomfortable because you're different. Humans are all different. People are all different. And we should embrace that, not hate or diminish people for it or break them down. So I think ultimately our culture isn't necessarily losing its touch. If anything, it's just evolving and becoming better, and we're always improving to be better people. Side tangent surprised me. We talked about the radical monarchs, but I spoke with Francisco. I wanted to hear what he had to say about it, and we had two different complete ideals. He was completely against the idea of anything like that radical monarchy. He thought the kids shouldn't be taught any of this material, that the parents should be the one teaching them, the friends will teach them, eventually it'll come around, and in his mind he thought people would be welcoming and people would learn how to teach their kids properly, and that this conversation should not be at school or through some program. And that's where I disagreed with him completely. Well, I would love for a perfect world where our parents and everyone could teach us the things we need, just our friends around us. I know we don't always have the best people around us to teach these things, and sometimes they breed hate or just dislike for different razas. Like freak, even in my own family, and even his, we talked about how they want to. He said mejor la raza get a white girl to make the race better, but then, which is kind of a crazy idea in itself. But on mine was like keep it in the race. They don't outwardly say it, but I know they're much happier when I bring a Mexican girl. And once I brought an African American girl home, and my mom was not mad or against it, but she was shocked. And I thought that was interesting. Bringing a black girl home was actually different for her. It was an idea that was like unheard of. I disagreed because I think the overall message of the radical monarchs of embracing difference and feeling proud of it, and not having to feel worse for it or feel above people for just taking pride in it, I think is an awesome message to be kids, to embrace our differences and to not feel shame for them. I think that's awesome. What I do disagree on with at least that portion of the video was how some of the topics I feel like were too heavy when it dealt with death, and I get these are reality situations, but I don't think 7 or 8 year olds should be taught these heavier topics at a young age. I think they should still be young, enjoy each other's company, be happy. I don't think they need the doom and gloom of the world upon them at 7 years old. Yes, teach them to embrace their differences and their happiness, but don't show them how many people are being murdered because of how different they may look, or their treatment is horrible because of how different they look. So yeah, essentially what I want to say is schools and these programs I feel like should exist to help embrace our differences, to teach the kids it's okay to be different, to look different, and to feel proud. But yeah, that's me and my video. We're ending this. Oh, Professor, you got me dying out here.